Okay, good afternoon everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abam. We have an amazing topic today, but today's Shiur is dedicated by my dear friend Reb Chaim HaKohen Kazdan and his wife Fegi. Kazdan, Rashi Tevois, Kohanim Shluchei D'Rachmana Ninu. In Leilui Nishmas, Reb Chaim's uncle, Habacher Chaim Yishai ben Doiv Beirish, whose yahrzeit was on Shabbos, Beis Tammuz, and Neshama Shavan Aliyah, should be a male tziyosher for his whole family. Okay, we have an amazing topic today. We have a revolutionary interpretation of one of the main events of Parshas Chukas, and this approach is very unique. Even though there's a question, can you use the word very to describe unique? It's unique. It's one of a kind. This is the approach of the Rogatchaver. Where's Dr. Soroka? You see, we were just at the Rogatchaver's kever in Latvia, in Dvinsk. And this approach of the Rogatchaver is really like a hallmark chidush of the Rogatchaver. So let me get it up on the screen. It comes from a number of different svarim of the Rogatchaver. It comes from, a number of years ago, I bought a Haggadah Shel Pesach from the Rogatchaver. They collected different ideas from different svarim of the Rogatchaver. And many times in my life, I've regretted seeing things that I said to myself, yeah, I'll never forget that. And unfortunately, I didn't remember where I saw something. But at least in this occasion, I'm very grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Hashem gave me the good sense to write down where I saw it, because I think if I wouldn't have written it down, I may have remembered the idea, but I don't know if I would have remembered where I saw it. So you always have to thank Hashem. Rabbi Isaac, how are you? You always have to thank Hashem when you have a good idea. You know, many people, they thank Hashem when good things happen to them. But when they have a good idea, why should you thank Hashem? That's your own idea. No. Even a good idea is a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know, David HaMelech needed to run away from Avimelech. He didn't know what to do. So what did he do? He feigned being a shaita. LeDavid, b'shanoisoi es tamoi lefnei Avimelech. B'shanoisoi es tamoi. He acted as if he was insane. Vayigarsheu vayelach, and Avimelech chased him away. What did David HaMelech say? Avarchas Hashem b'chaleis, I will bless Hashem at all times. Says Rav Miller, from here we see, David HaMelech didn't allow himself to be fooled, to think, oh, it's a good idea, so this is my idea. I have to thank Hashem when I win the lottery, but when I have a good idea, it's my idea. No, a good idea comes from Hashem. So therefore David HaMelech says, Avarchas Hashem b'chaleis. Anyway, we're going to ask a number of questions about Mei Meriva, and really there's an amazing approach to address this from the Rogatchaver. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe leimor kaches hamateh v'hakeles hoida atav ha'aroin achicha v'dibartem elasala le'eineihem v'nasan meimav v'hoitzei saha lahem ayim min hasala v'hishkisa es hoida v'es be'iram v'yikach Moshe es hamateh milafnei Hashem ka'asher tzivahu. Okay, so Moshe took the stick milafnei Hashem. What do you mean milafnei Hashem? What does that mean milafnei Hashem? He took the stick from before Hashem? This is Moshe's stick. Moshe has a stick. Why is the stick called milafnei Hashem? God didn't tell him, take the stick milafnei Hashem. He said, take the stick. Why did God say, take the stick? Say, v'kach es mateh, take stick. What's the stick? Well, there's like a special stick. So presumably it's Moshe's stick. So if it says stick, why does it say, milafnei Hashem? Vayore Moshe es yadai, vayaches hasela b'mateu pa'amoyim. Vayetzu ma'im rabim v'ateish toida uve'ira. Moshe hit the rock. God never told him to hit the rock. God said, "V'dibartem el hasela," speak to the rock. Why did Moshe hit the rock? And what's the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu? Is the sin that he didn't listen, that he hit the rock? It's interesting, and here's the main question. What do we call the sin? Hey ma mei meriva asharavu v'nei Yisrael es Hashem v'yikadesh bam. These are the waters of strife. The waters of strife? Nobody's fighting over here. What's strife? There's no strife. You want to say that Moshe didn't listen because he hit the rock? You want to say that he said Shimuna HaMoirim? There's no. Okay, but what's the strife? Why is it called the waters of strife? I mean, maybe we should call Kairach. I understand you call it strife. Meraglim, you should call it strife. But this is a rock. Nobody's fighting with a rock. What's the strife over here? Why is it called Me Meriva? Rashi says that Hashem said in Parshas Beshalach, Rashi says, Rashi tells us, V'hikisa batsur. That's going back into Parshas Beshalach. Going back to Parshas Beshalach, V'hikisa vatsur, Al hatsur loy nemar. Moshe Rabbeinu was not told to hit on the rock. Elo bitsur. How do you hit in a rock? You could hit the top of the rock. How do you hit in the rock? So Rashi says, in the rock, mikan shehamata hoyasho min davar chazak. From here we see that Moshe's stick was made out of a very strong material. Ushmoi san perinon. It was called san perinon. V'hatsur nivka mipanav. And the rock broke before it. Now many people have asked me, what's san perinon? Is it sapphire? Is it a ruby? Is it... I don't know. All I know is it's san perinon. And it's a very strong material. And it could hit a rock. It could shatter a rock. Okay. Now, if we look a little further, the psukim say, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe Hashev Esmate Aharon Lefnei Hoidus Lemishmeres Lois Lefnei Meri. This is in Parshas Kairach. Utzechal Tilu Noisam Me'alai V'Layamusu. Hashem told Moshe, return the staff of Aaron before the Eidos, to preserve it as a sign of the rebellion, and the complaints of the Bnei Yisrael will cease from Ami, and I won't die, and you won't die. So that means that Aaron HaKoyin had a stick. Aaron's stick, what happened to it? Vayotze tzitz, vayotze ferach, vayotze tzitz, vayigmol shkedim. What was Aaron's stick made out of? Wood. What was Moshe's stick made out of? San perinoin. Where was Aaron's stick parked? Milufnei Hashem. Whoa. There are two sticks. There's the stick of Aaron. There's the stick of Moshe. The stick of Aaron is wood. It's milufnei Hashem. The stick of Moshe is San perinoin. It's not milufnei Hashem. It's in Moshe Rabbeinu's belt. Could it be that when the pasuk says, "Vayikach Moshe es hamata milufnei Hashem," is it possible Moshe took the wrong stick? Is it possible Moshe took the wrong stick? Instead of taking the stick that was on him, he took Aaron's stick. Is that possible? Why would he have done something like that? Could it be in his great humility, says the Rogatchaver? When God said, take the stick, Moshe Rabbeinu said, my stick is not the stick. Aaron's stick maybe is the stick. That's the stick that you asked me in last week's Parsha to put in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Milufnei Hashem. We know one of the items in the Holy of Holies was Aaron's stick that gave forth flour, and it sprouted, and it produced almonds. Is it possible Moshe used the wrong stick? Now, if he would have used the wrong stick, then maybe the stick is not going to do the job, because Aaron's stick is made out of wood and Moshe Rabbeinu's stick is made out of san perinon. So you'll say, well, either way, doesn't he have to talk to the rock? But as we're about to see, it might make a halachic difference. There's a halacha in Hilchos Mikvos. Flowing water is a spring. Dripping water, rainwater, is a mikvah. Reb Tzadok HaKohen testified on flowing water that's more than rainwater, that it's kosher. If you have mostly flowing water and some rainwater, rainwater is only kosher if it's stationary. Spring water is kosher even on the move. Reb Tzadok HaKohen testified, if the majority of the water is spring water, it's kosher even while it's moving, even if there's some rainwater there. If you have rainwater that is now flowing, then you could stop it. Let's say you have rainwater that's on the move. You could stop it, even with a stick, even with a branch, even with a person who's toivel, a person who's tameh. Says Rabbi Yossi, anything that's mekabel tuma ein mazchilen by. One way to learn that is, let's say you have rainwater. Rainwater is only kosher if it's stationary. Let's say you get it to stop. So Rabbi Yossi is saying, if you get rainwater to stop with davar shel mekabel tuma, then you cannot be toivel in it. But here's another way to look at it. The Rambam in Hilchos Mikvos says, noitfim shel Charash, Chalaka, v'harei hamayim nischalen v'yardim aleh, harei hein kesherim. V'chol davar shemekabel tuma, v'afilu midivrei soifrim ein maschilen by. What if you cause spring water to move with a davar hamekabel tuma? The Rambam says that is no good. Friends, san perinon, which is a kind of stone, is it mekabel tuma? Nope. What about a wooden stick? Is a wooden stick mekabel tuma? Yes. So Aaron's stick is mekabel tuma. Moshe's stick is not mekabel tuma. Says the Rogatchaver in the Haggadah Shel Pesach Tzafnas Paneach. The difference between the stick of Moshe and the stick of Aaron. The stick of Moshe, Rashi says in Beshalach, was made out of a very strong material. It's called san perinon, and it could crack a rock. However, the staff of Aaron was made out of wood. Says the Rogatchaver. This explains the whole episode of Mei Meriva in Parshas Chukas. Moshe Rabbeinu, when he heard Hashem say, take the stick and gather the community, you and Aaron, and speak to the rock. Moshe said it has to be, the Rebbeinu Shem is referring to Aaron's stick. Because you said, take the stick, the well-known stick, Behei HaYediyah. We know Hey shows something, Mashehu Miyuchad, something special. Like V'arach Aleha Ha'oila, which the Kavanah is the first Oila. Now, in Parshas Kairach, the staff of Aaron was a special staff. It was put in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It sprouted. Now Moshe Rabbeinu, how's he going to get the staff of Aaron? Wait a second. Moshe Rabbeinu is not allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim to take Aaron's staff. You're right, he's not allowed to go. But he understood that Hashem told him to go. So when God says to go, you go. So even though halachically Moshe is not allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, even to get a stick, but if Hashem says take the stick, and if he means the stick of Aaron, so now Moshe Rabbeinu has no choice, he has to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So Moshe goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, why did Moshe think that Hashem meant Aaron's stick? The answer is Moshe Rabbeinu, in his humility, he figured if God said the stick is my brother's stick. The Rogatchaver adds, if Moshe would have spoke to the rock and the water would have come out, there would have been no problems. But because he hit the stick and he hit it with wood, so now there's a halachic problem as follows. We paskin like Rabbi Yossi and Mikvahs that anything that's makabel tumah, you can't cause water to flow through it. The water will not be a valid mikvah. Friends, how were Klal Yisrael toivel in the midbar? You think they had a Vizhnitzer mikvah over there? A Satmar a mikvah? A Belzer mikvah? What kind of mikvah did they had in the midbar? If a woman became tameh, she became a nida, how did she go to the mikvah? The answer is Be'era Shel Miriam, the well of Miriam. Where did that come from? Moshe hit the rock. Moshe hit the rock with Aaron's stick. Aaron's stick is Makabal Tumah. Now the water that's flowing is not tahar. The water that flows out of the rock is pasal. So that whole year, until they crossed the Yarden, there was no mikvah. Friends, if a woman can't go to the mikvah, guess what there isn't in the house? There's no shalom bayis in the house. How could there be shalom bayis if the husband and wife are prohibited to each other? The reason it's called Mei Meriva is because since Moshe didn't speak to the rock, he hit the rock. He hit the rock with Aaron's stick. Aaron's stick is Makabel Tumah. Now the water that comes out of the rock is not a kosher a mikvah. Now the women can't go to the mikvah. Now all you have is they fight like cats and dogs all day. They're at each other's throats because the women can't go to the mikvah. Now we know why it's called Mei Meriva. So for a year they couldn't go to the mikvah. Like the Gemara in Shabbos says, Shalom Bayis is taloi on a woman going to the mikvah. Now if Moshe Rabbeinu would have even... So you say, what was the sin of Moshe? Was the sin that he that he hit the rock? Nah, it's not such a big deal. Because even if he would have used his own stick to hit the rock, the water still would have been kosher. The problem was, he hit the rock, and he hit the rock with the wrong stick, because now he's hitting the rock with the stick of Aaron. The stick of Aaron is Makabel Tumah. Where did this sin come from? Moshe Rabbeinu, it came from his excessive humility. He was too humble. If he would have had a little bit more gaiva, then when God said hit the rock with the stick, Moshe would have taken his stick. But out of his misplaced humility, he used Aaron's stick. Says the Rogatchaver, the sin of Mei Meriva is reminiscent in the sin that destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Namely, the Gemara says, An v'sanusai sharab Zechariah ben Avkulas, where the Gemara says the humility of Zechariah ben Avkulas, hechriva es batenu v'sarfa es heichalenu v'higlisanu me'artzenu. And we're going to see what that sin was. And we're going to explain that even though if you ask most people, what's the biggest problem? People would say people are too arrogant. No, just the opposite. The biggest problem is people have too much false humility. Yes, we know, interpersonally, bein adam lachaveroi, people are too arrogant. Person says something you don't like, do you know who I am? I'm Rabban shel kol bnei agoyla of this generation and all the previous generations. Pal, you can't even read the Aleph Beis. That's a little bit of an excessive opinion of yourself. How many blot and shas do you know with all the Tosfos in? You don't know Tosfos? So, who do you think you are already? Now, interpersonally, your wife says something. Don't you know who I am? I'm one of the Gedolei Hadar. One of the Gedolei Hadar. You can't even read a Mishnah in Perkei Avos. What do you mean you're one of the Gedolei Hadar? So, interpersonally, the problem is people have too much arrogance. But bein adam la'amakoim, people have way too much humility. Says the Rogatchaver, the Ched of Moshe Rabbeinu is when Hashem said, take the stick, he took Aaron's stick. If he would have taken his own stick, even if he would have hit the rock, there wouldn't have been any problem with the water. The women would have gone to the mikvah, and there would be no Mei Meriva. This is also found in the Rogatchaver ala Torah, produced by Rabbi Menachem Kasher. He says, when it says hamata is like ha'oila, hazaroya, Hayarach. So Moshe Rabbeinu thought it must be the stick of Aaron, which was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Lifnei Hashem. By the way, that's an amazing diuk. That's why it says, Vayikach Moshe Znata Mi Lifnei Hashem. You get it? The psukim are so compelling according to the Rogatchaver. Moshe took the stick, Mi Lifnei Hashem. And Hashem's kavana was Moshe should take his stick. If Moshe would have taken his stick, he wouldn't have gone into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Also, now the water becomes pasal l'tvila. That's why it's called Mei Meriva. That was the chait, because we know from Hilchos Mikvahs that if you hit something which is Makabel Tumah, the water is pasal. Because of this humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he thought Aaron was greater, this is similar to the misplaced humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. This is also reiterated in Shaus Tshuvas Tzafnas Paneach Siman Kuf Yates. The Rogatchaver says, he says you could explain Mei Meriva, because Moshe Rabbeinu took the stick Milafnei Hashem. That Moshe Rabbeinu explained the nevuah that was going on Aaron's stick, which was of eights, and Davra Makabel Tuma Nifsal Hama'ayan, so therefore it's no longer a kasher mikvah, and there's no shalom bayis. Now the truth is Hashem's kavanah was the staff of Moshe, which was San Perinon, which is not Makabel Tuma. Okay, let's try to study what exactly was the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. The Gemara in Gittin tells us that they sent, because of the episode of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, that he threw Bar Kamsa out of the party, so he tattled on his buddy, and the Roman government sent a carbon, and they said, let's see if the Jews bring it. So they sent a fat cow. While it was being sent, they put a mum in the lip or in the eye, something that for us is a mum and for them is not a mum. The Rabbanon wanted to be makar of it because of Shalom Malchus. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas said, what do you mean? You can't do that. People are going to mistakenly think you can be makar of a carbon that's a mum. So they said, let's kill Bar Kamsa. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas says, well, then people are going to think that if you put a mum in kachim, they get killed. Says Rabbi Yochanan, the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Question: how is what Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas said humility? That's not humility. Maybe you'll say his ignorance. I mean, let's think for a moment. What was the halacha? Was the halacha they should be makar of the carbon or they shouldn't be makar of the carbon? If the halacha is they should be makar of the carbon, then say Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas is an ignoramus, but he's not a humble person. If the halacha is they should not be makar of the carbon, then what did Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas do wrong? Says the Maritz Chios something amazing. The halacha is, in this case, like Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas said, in general, if they could not be makar of this carbon, they could, halachically, they were not allowed to be makar of the carbon because it's a mum. Halachically, they were not allowed to kill someone who put a mum in the carbon. That's according to the letter of the law. But extra unusual times call for unusual measures. And this particular circumstance called for a hayrasha, that either they needed to bring the carbon or kill Bar Kamsa. But that's not the halacha. In this case, for the well-being of Klal Yisrael, we needed a Gadol b'Yisrael to stand up, to rise up, and have the gumption and the audacity to take on his shoulders an extra legal measure. But Zechariah ben Avkulas was too meek to make that decision. He was afraid to make that decision. He says, but it says in the Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to, and he was right, it said in the Shulchan Aruch. But this was an extra unusual case, and it called for extra unusual measures. And because he didn't have the audacity to take on his shoulders to give a kula, it destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Look, there's an amazing Maretz Chios over here. Maretz Chios says, let me make it a little bigger. An v'sanusa sharav zechar ben avkula sechriya v'yitzei nechtu b'tzil lo yadate ma ta ha'isa b'zeh sh'lo yiniach lekabel karbanai. I don't get what mistake he made. V'loi l'hayrono v'hayu loi la'ashas loymar. Either it should say the righteousness or the piety of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, but why the humility? Rashi seems to be bothered by this, and Rashi says the patience. But the Maretz Chios says, look, humility and patience are not the exact same midah. Says the Maretz Chios, me'ikar hadin, it was permitted to be makriv the carbon as a balmum because it was a sakana for Klal Yisrael. Like we find in Yuma, the Kohanim wore big day kahuna shloi b'shas avoda, that was shatnez, because of Eis Lasash Lashem Hefero Tarasecha. The Magen Avram even brings a raya from this Gemara that you're allowed to violate a loisaseh mipnei emas hamalchus. The fact that Chazal criticized the approach of Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas, who was worried, people are going to say you're makriv karbanos ba'amum, that means halachically they were really allowed to be makriv the carbon. Or halachically they were allowed to kill Zechariah ben Bar Kamsa because he's a roideif. But because of the humility of Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas, lo yirhiv b'nafshayoyis, he didn't have that confidence, that ambition to go beyond the specific legal measure. He was afraid that they were going to suspect that he's bending the halacha, and therefore he didn't consider himself great enough to, so to speak, make an exception to the regular halacha. Sometimes there are exceptions. This was a hayrasha. And he said, look, such a decision to be makriv the carbon, that's for bigger people than me. I'm not roy to do that. I'm not roy to make a hayrasha, to make this big decision. Therefore, Chazal say the humility of he didn't want to stand up. He didn't want to take the responsibility. That's what destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. By the way, if you look in the Medrash Anecha on the words B'nei Tzion HaYikarim, the Chazal say Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas was there. Reb Zechariah ben Avkulas had the opportunity to be moicha, and he wasn't moicha. Why? He felt himself too humble. Who am I? The guy is using his phone by davening. Who am I to tell him to put it away? What do you mean, who are you? Yesterday, when your wife told you to take out the garbage, you told her, do you know who I am? I don't take out the garbage. Yesterday, you were a big bal gaiva. Now, all of a sudden, when the guy has his phone out by davening, you can't say anything? No, just the opposite. When your wife tells you to take out the garbage, you say, yes, honey, how many times could I do it for you today? I'm at your service. What do you need? Next time somebody insults you, you say, thank you, I'm afar va'efar. But if you see someone in shul who's talking or has their phone out, that's the time to step up to the plate and say, Rabbi Yid, could you please put that away? You can't have it out during davening. You really shouldn't bring it into the shul in the first place. You're desecrating the Beis HaMikdash. That's the time for gaiva. There's a complaint against Zechariah ben Avkulas. He didn't speak up when he was allowed to. People have it all wrong. People think humility is a great thing. Humility destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. Humility is the source of the Chet of Mei Meriva. Even according to the Rogatchaver, we could never say something like this. But the way the Rogatchaver understands the episode of Mei Meriva, Moshe Rabbeinu, also, again, we can't say this, but just to say over what the Rogatchaver learns, that Moshe Rabbeinu's had extra humility that, according to the Rogatchaver, was not appropriate in this situation. And if you think that what I'm saying is hyperbole, that the main problem today is misplaced humility, no, I say it in all seriousness. The main cause of most slackening off in Avodas Hashem comes from misplaced humility. Rabbi Yid, I don't understand. Davening is 8 o'clock. How do you come at 8:03 and first start putting on your tefillin? So the time your talis and tefillin is on, it's 8:09. You can't say the whole Psukei de Zimra. You're not saying Shemona Esrei with the Tzibor. Why didn't you get to the shul at 5 to 8 so you could actually daven b'tzibor? Rabbi, give me a break. You think it matters what time I come? You think Hashem has much bigger things to worry about than what time I come. Hashem's worried about the nuclear plants in Iran. Hashem's worried about Trump. Hashem's very busy with Trump these days. But me, it doesn't matter exactly what time I come. Who am I? I'm Afar ve'efer. It matters 8 o'clock, 8:05, 7:58. What difference does it make? I'll come 8:37 when it's all over. Man, I'm telling you, it doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference because we don't believe it makes a difference, because we have too much false humility. We save all of our gaiva for anything that anybody says to us, does to us. They didn't honor us enough. All of a sudden, then we're big bali gaiva. But when it comes to any matter of avodas Hashem, all of a sudden I'm a pashat yid. Rabbi Yid, how come you only learned 7 minutes today? You have so much time to learn. Why don't you learn? Nah, it doesn't matter. You think it matters if I learn 7 minutes or 9 minutes? Rabbi Yid, don't you know you have a neshama? Don't you know every word you learn changes the course of history, changes the whole world? The whole stock market is dependent on how much time you devote to Talmud Torah. Me, I'm a nothing. I'm a pashat yid. I'm a nobody. Nobody cares what I do. I'm not important. I'm Afar ve'efer. Afar ve'efer. When the Gabbai gave you Glila, you were going to take the baito and you're going to strangle him with it. You didn't say you were Afar ve'efer. Now all of a sudden you're Afar ve'efer. No. Afar ve'efer is between you and your friend. But when it comes to Avodas Hashem, a Jew has to say, B'shvili nivra ha'olam. Every word I say, every tefillah I say, every minute I devote to tefillah, every minute I come earlier, the way I conduct myself in the Beis HaKnesses, in the Beis HaMedrash, the way I learn Torah, changes the course of events in the world, changes the course of world history. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of misplaced humility. I remember Rav Miller has a epic shiur that he gave. It's called The Perils of Humility. The Perils of Humility. Here you have a guy. He's walking down the street and he's eating a slice of pizza. You can't eat in the street. He eats in the street, and at the wedding they call him up, Machabed, Rav Ram Yitzchak, Friedman, Roish Koilel of Koilim, Chasidei Ungvar, and then the second, no, you can't call him up. He was eating pizza in the street. So what? No, if he was eating pizza in the street, Rashi says, he has no dignity. If he has no dignity, he would lie. And he's pasol le'edos. You see, if somebody does not have self-respect, you can't even believe a word they say, because there's nothing stopping them from lying. The foundation of being a human being is having a certain confidence and value for your own worth. Rabbeinu Yonah says, the first step in Avodas Hashem is to recognize your esteem and your esteem in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah, once you recognize your own greatness, now we could work on humility. Humility, many people, they haven't even gotten to first base, and all midos are measured out. There are certain times that call for humility, and there are many times that call for a healthy esteem in Avodas Hashem. And according to the Rogatchaver, the sin of Mei Meriva, and the Gemara says the sin that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash was the Misplaced humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. We are soon starting the 3 weeks. Where Chazal were koiveya, dine avelos for Yerushalayim. It's very interesting. The Gemara in Bava Kama says on Nun Testament Aleph, going on to Nun Testament Beis, Eliezer Zeira was wearing black shoes and he was in the Shuk of Neherda. So that the Reish Galusa found him. He said, "Why are you wearing these shoes?" So Eliezer Zeira said, "What do you mean? I'm mourning over Yerushalayim." So they said, "Who do you think you are to mourn over Yerushalayim?" The Gemara says it was considered gaiva to mourn over Yerushalayim. To mourn over Yerushalayim, that means you understand what Yerushalayim means, what it represents, what its importance is. You have to be a great Talmid Chacham to mourn over Yerushalayim. Back in the day, you couldn't just publicly mourn over Yerushalayim. You had to be worthy. You had to be deserving to mourn over Yerushalayim. Otherwise, it was yuhara. But it's so interesting that in the 3 weeks, Chazal are koiveya, that every single Jew has to mourn over Yerushalayim. Why? Why is that? The answer is maybe because since the sin that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash was a misplaced humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, there's a certain rectification that's needed. That during the 3 weeks, we need to rectify the misplaced humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas that contributed to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And a very great principle in Avodas Hashem is recognizing your importance. And this is something we see from the story of Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Here the father became inebriated, he became uncovered, and Shem covered his father, but not before Cham came along and publicly humiliated his father. And we know because of that, Cham, him, and all of his descendants were cursed for all time, and Shem and his descendants were awarded and rewarded with the mitzvah of tzitzis for all generations. What are we getting so worked up on? Cham now has to suffer. All the future generations are being punished for all time. And Shem, all millions and millions of his descendants are zoicha to the mitzvah of tzitzis. What did he do already? He just took a little blankie and he covered his father. Okay, finished. What's the big deal? The answer is every act is a very, very, very big deal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a person where our actions, our words, our thoughts change the reality of existence and change the history of the world. And according to the one of the great challenges of life is knowing how to balance when humility is called for and when a certain, what we call Vayigbal libay b'darchei Hashem, that when it comes to Avodas Hashem, a person has to have a certain ambition to rise up and to assume responsibility for their actions. This is the amazing Perils of the Rogatchaver, that the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu was he took the wrong stick. He took Aaron's stick. Aaron's stick is wood. Aaron's stick is Mekabel Tumah. Now the mikvah is puzzle. Now the women can't go to the mikvah. Hema mei meriva asharova b'nei Yisrael. Have a great day, everyone. Bracha v'atzlacha.
Thank you very much.
Baruch tiyah. You got it.